Okay, this is the third video on how to use Sales Engine. So I already covered qualified customers tab and qualification results tab. Now we are in the customizations tab. So again, this is for a legacy quest order. So depending on the provider, the customizations tab does change on the specifics that are required in order to place an order for each provider. So in this case, it's applying for legacy quest, but this changes if it's Comcast, AT&T, Charter, Bright House, whoever it is. This interface would change. Now, here you have required fields. For example, with Legacy Quest, what we are seeing in the customizations tab is things that I can add to the service or things that I must select in order to place the order. If you look down here, the prepared order would not turn on until I can actually move forward into placing an order. Usually, depending on the provider, but usually the provider at this point, for example, if it was Comcast or AT&T or Time Warner Cable, at some point during here in the customizations tab, I'm gonna run a credit check depending on the provider. Again, I'm just saying depending on the provider. Instead of preparing an order and moving forward, it also applies here for Legacy Quest. When I click on that, it's actually gonna run a credit check, and you'll see how do I know that I'm running a credit check. Depending on provider, at this point you would also be probably authenticating the customer. This would be primarily for the Time Warner Cable orders, where at this point, before you actually move forward, you want to authenticate the customer, and there'll be a button next to to run credit check or prepare order or continue. There'll be an authenticate button that you want to click on and authenticate the customer before moving forward. Again, it changes depending on the provider. Now, here with Legacy Quest, this might be available with all providers, but with Legacy Quest, it is showing up. I don't know if it's with the other ones as well. If you click on features, again, it's a pop-up with information about the service. Because I cannot move into the qualification results tab and actually use that feature again, it's made available in the customizations tab. Now, here, this is a required field. Usually you see lettering that says required field must be selected, or you start to see like asterisks or stars next to the information. In this case, selecting the prices is required. Once I make that selection, here's where we start to see things dynamically affect the cart. So as you can see, $64.95 for the monthly price and the promo price, and the initial fees is $36.25. So things start to be added to the cart. Under the cart, you see the options and fees. There's the bullet points. The activation fee is added. The high-speed internet, $64.95 per month for the service, is starting to be added down here under the cart. Also, now the next option is the modem options. It also requires, as you can see, there's a star next to it, so I must select one of three of these options. Now the options do affect what shows on the cart. If I already have the modem, there's no extra fees added. If the customer wants to purchase the modem, there's going to be the shipment fee and the $99.99 added to the total initial fees. If they want to lease the modem, then $6.99 is added, and then there's the shipment fee of $14.99 that will be added. Scroll down, another selection here is for this provider is the installation option, which there's nothing showing it. It just says please pick one item from the list, but if I try to continue, I can't, so I know that it's required. Usually you'll see something next to it that says that it's required. This in the training environment, so it might not be showing it. I'm going to select, for example, a standard tech installation. What this does is that it adds the installation fee into the monthly initial fees. It actually took away the shipment fee because the installation specialist is going to take that equipment. So this is how dynamically what the selections affect the order and the cart over here on the right side. So these are things that the agent wants to be aware of. So I'm just going to go ahead and click self-install. It's just going to be the activation plus the shipment of the equipment. There is some options that are not necessary to select, and usually what happens is during training you'll know which ones they are, and the tool will let you move forward if they're not applicable. There is instances where Sales Engine might allow you to move forward and it's a required field. Later on there will be an error message that shows up here in red, like the ones we saw in the qualification results tab when the provider was not available. If that happens, please point it out. We do want to make sure that those errors don't happen where we have fields that are required and allow you to move forward. But most of the time, we do have all of them under control. So this one right here, It's not applicable. I don't have to select it. I do want to point out there's different options for this drop down list, and there's an eye next to it. What happens if I click on that eye? Well, if it shows up during the tool and you click on it, it's going to give you specific information for that service that you can add on. This is information about that CenturyLink at East Advanced and at East Standard Internet Service protection plans. So this is not an option that I must select to continue, so I'm going to leave it blank. The next option is the customer information. Now this is very important. It automatically populates information from the that you gather in the qualified customers tab, and if you happen to update the widget at any point before moving into this page, then that information is translated into these fields automatically. This is the information that's going to be run for the order. This is the customer's information that's going to be running in this case for running the credit check. So I have the first name, the last name, the email. If at this point you know that the email address what it is now, you want to go ahead and make the fix here, but also you want to make the fix in the widget. So the email has been fixed here. Now I'm going to open the widget and I'm going to correct the email because it still says no email. In order for the email to be saved on Sales Engine, I must make the fix here too and update it. So once I do that and submit it, it does take you back to the first page to qualify customer, then move back to the customization, and everything should be updated. So the email is updated and everything's working now. Depending on the provider, you might have different ways that this shows up, but if the date of birth needs to be used, there's going to be a calendar. In this case is a calendar that you can move back and forth by decades. You click on the year, the month, and the day so that you have the date of birth of the customer. If there's any disclosures that need to be read for specific providers before collecting information, you got to make sure that agent's reading the disclosures. That's part of the training, so I won't really touch more about that. Account verification, this is depending on the provider. If it needs to be done with the social or driver license, it could be an authentication with different providers such as Time Warner Cable or Comcast. What are the options that you have? They don't show up at the same spot, but again, this is dynamically changes with the providers. So it's different for the different providers. In this case, I'm going to use the social security number. I could use the driver license, so you can see that it changes the fields that I need to complete. So I must enter the social security number. And once I do that, I have entered the social security number. I've selected all the options that need to be selected in order to move forward. Now I'm seeing here is that the system's not telling me that I have entered less than the required digits for the phone number. And even though I updated up here, it didn't update right here in the box. So you have to make sure that you have the right number of digits for the contact phone number. And as you can see, the prepare order button has been turned on. I can run the credit check. If I get rid of those 2 digits, it's not gonna allow me to move forward. This is something that's in training, but once you're in production, it'll show you, it'll give you a red message. You must enter the right amount of digits. You're missing digits. So now that I'm ready to move forward, I still want to check things. So if there's more information on the bottom, like here the shipping address, make sure that if it's the shipping address that the customer wants to receive the information, that make sure that you get the right one. If it must be updated, make sure it's updated. If it's okay, just leave it as is. And then there's the billing address. If it's okay, if it's correct, then leave it as is. If not, then update. So I can run the credit check at this point. Basically all the selections have been added. The initials and monthly prices are showing up, so I'll click on prepare order. In this case, it's running a credit check for this customer. Now, depending on the provider that you're using, you're either going to move forward into the review and submit tab if everything works fine. Sometimes you might get an error message. Something happened with the credit check. Depending on the provider, again, this works differently when you're in Sales Engine, but that's covered during the training for each specific provider. In this case, I know that for Legacy Quest, the next step should be to give me the installation date. So I'm not going to move into the review and submit tab. It's still going to keep me in the customizations tab, and it's going to give me options to select an installation date. And if any payments are required, then I would have to collect the card information for the customer. It's spinning, so it's saying that it's running the credit check. But that's pretty much all the information that it's needed to know on the customizations tab. It does change based on the provider what it's needed, and that is covered during the training. Here we go. As you can see, the credit check was run. I can check the appointment. For Legacy Quest, I have the windows and options of the dates, so I select the appointment. There's a payment required, $25. I select the type of card that is acceptable. Then I must enter the card information, the expiration date, the name of the card holder. Again, this changes depending on the provider. Not all the providers have the same layout or the same, basically they don't lay them out in the same order or in the same way that you're seeing it right now, but this is for you to see how Sales Engine looks at specific points. So after I make all the selections that are required here, then there's the billing address information, which I need to make sure I have the right one. When you have billing address information next to a card information, if it's a credit card, debit card, you got to make sure that the billing address is actually linked to the card. So if the card billing address currently is linked still to the old address of where they're not to the address where they're placing the order, that you got to make the update here. Otherwise, this could create a system failure once the order is sent, and they might have to contact the customer. We don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that the order goes as smoothly as possible. So if their card is still linked to the old address or another address, make sure that's updated. Also, when you collect card information, we do want to make sure that you get the authorization to charge that card, and that is direct authorization from the person who owns the card. So you do have to speak with that person and find out if they're okay with charges being applied to their card. This is when the provider does allow for other household members or friends or family members to pay for an order, and the person placing the order doesn't have a card. So if we say with this provider you can use another person's card, go ahead and grab the information, but you got to make sure that you speak directly with that person to get their authorization. So at this point I'm ready to move forward. I would click on review order. This takes me into the review and submit tab. So with other providers the same. Once you are done with everything that's required, the customization tab, then you move into the review submit tab. I'm not gonna go into much detail right here in the review and submit tab. I'm just gonna leave it as is right now, and I'll cover it in another video. But for now, I've already covered the customizations tab. At this point, really, if I try to use the edit option for the widget, it would just be updating information on Sales Engine, but none of that information is going to be sent with the order, because the order information has already been completed. I already run a credit check. All of that information has already submitted. So it's too late to use the widget. The widget should be used any point before you moving between the customization and the review submit. It should really be used before any credit checks, any authentication checks. You never want to use the widget past those points. So the widget should always be used before submitting a credit check or authenticating a customer. So at this point, there's nothing else to cover about the customizations tab. We're already in the review and submit tab, so that's going to be the next video.